In the world of reality television, the divorce is almost always the loudest part of the story. When a famous couple splits, the gossip flows, the tabloids speculate, the fans pick sides, and usually both halves of the former couple eventually do interviews or write tell-alls trying to control the narrative. The Roloffs, in many ways, did not follow that pattern. Matt and Amy Roloff announced their separation in 2015 and finalized their divorce in 2016. And for a while, they handled the public side of things with restraint. They did not appear in tabloid drama. They did not throw each other under the bus on camera. They continued to film Little People Big World together, with Matt on one part of the farm and Amy on another, doing their best to keep things civil for their children and for the cameras. And then, in 2019, Amy Roloff released a memoir. The book was called A Little Me. It was published by Simon & Schuster, and it contained, buried inside what was otherwise a faith-driven, inspirational story about life with dwarfism, a few passages that would change the way fans saw the entire Roloff marriage forever. Tonight on LPBW Update, we are walking through Amy Roloff's memoir. We are going to look at why she wrote it. We are going to look at what she revealed about Matt and Caryn Chandler. We are going to look at Matt's response. And we are going to look at why this 7-year-old book still matters in 2026, when the Roloff family looks completely different from how it looked when the book first came out. Because memoirs do not just tell history, they shape it. And A Little Me shaped the way America understood the end of the Roloff marriage in ways that still reverberate through the family today. Let us start with who Amy Roloff is, beyond the show. Amy Jo Knight was born on September 17, 1962 in Michigan. She is one of 4 children. She was born with achondroplasia dwarfism, which is the most common form of short-limbed dwarfism. Her parents, Patricia and Gordon Knight, raised her in a faith-centered home in suburban Michigan. Her father, in particular, was a major influence on her life. Gordon Knight had a saying that he repeated to Amy throughout her childhood whenever she felt insecure or inadequate. He would tell her, "God does not make mistakes." That sentence, simple as it is, became the anchor of Amy's entire identity. When she was bullied in school, when she struggled with feeling different, when she wondered whether the world would ever fully accept her, her father's voice would come back to her. God does not make mistakes. And that faith, that anchoring, would carry her through every major challenge of her adult life, including, eventually, the end of her marriage. Amy met Matthew Roloff in the 1980s. Matt also has dwarfism, although his condition is different from Amy's. They fell in love. They got married in 1987. They had 4 children together over the next decade. Twin boys Zach and Jeremy in 1990, daughter Molly in 1993, and son Jacob in 1997. They built a life on Roloff Farms in Hillsboro, Oregon. They raised their kids, they built businesses. They became reality television stars when Little People Big World premiered on TLC in 2006. By every visible measure, they were one of the most successful families in reality television. And by every measure that mattered, they were also a couple slowly drifting apart. The pressures of fame, the personality differences, the exhaustion of decades of marriage, the complicated dynamics of running a family business together while parenting 4 children together while filming a television show together. Something started to crack, and by the time they announced their separation in 2015, the cracks had become a chasm. For the next several years, Amy lived in a kind of public-facing limbo. She continued to film the show. She continued to be on Roloff Farms during pumpkin season. She continued to be Matt's business partner in some ways and his ex-spouse in others. The divorce was finalized in 2016. Matt began dating Caryn Chandler publicly in 2017. Amy began dating Chris Merrick that same year. And the show continued, awkwardly at times, to document a divorced couple sharing screen time and a property and 4 shared children. By 2019, Amy was ready to tell her side of the story. Not on camera, not in a tabloid interview, in a book, her book. A Little Me was published in late 2019. The book was promoted as an inspirational memoir about life with dwarfism. The marketing materials emphasized Amy's faith, her resilience, and her father's words, "God does not make mistakes." The cover featured Amy smiling. The publisher emphasized that the book would inspire those who had long followed the Roloffs as well as newcomers. The New York Journal of Books described it as a feel-good, inspirational memoir about a remarkable woman who addressed challenges head-on with a positive outlook and deep faith. That was the framing. That was how Amy wanted the book to be received. And for the most part, that is what the book delivered. It covered her childhood, it covered her faith journey, it covered her experiences growing up with achondroplasia, it covered her early marriage and her early years of motherhood, it covered the show, it covered her divorce. It was, for the most part, an uplifting and thoughtful account of a complicated life. But buried inside that uplifting framework were a few specific passages that fans seized on the moment they were published. The passages were about Matt, and specifically, they were about Caryn Chandler. The most explosive passage came in the chapter where Amy described the period leading up to her separation from Matt. She wrote about noticing that Matt was spending more and more time at a tavern he often frequented in the evenings after filming and working on the farm. She wrote that the farm manager, who had been working for them for a number of years by then, seemed to be around more and more often as well. She wrote, in the form of a question that she said she had been asking herself at the time, what, if anything, was going on? And then she answered her own question. She wrote that it dawned on her. Matt and the farm manager, who had been working for them for a number of years by then, seemed to have more than just a working relationship or friendship. And then she wrote the line that broke the internet for fans of Little People, Big World. She said she saw messages, pictures, and other things that should not have been shared between people who just worked together and were still married to other people. She wrote that she was devastated. She also wrote with painful honesty that in hindsight, she knew she should have said something right away, but she did not. She said she was scared and ashamed that anything remotely like that could be happening. Now, take a moment with what Amy wrote because it is significant. She did not directly accuse Matt and Caryn of having a physical affair during the marriage. She did not provide screenshots or photos as evidence. She did not name specific incidents in graphic detail. What she did was describe a pattern of behavior that, from her perspective, indicated something more than a working relationship between her husband and the woman he worked with. She described seeing messages and pictures that, in her interpretation, were inappropriate for two people who were just colleagues and were still married to other people. She described her own emotional reaction. She described the shame she felt. She described, in the end, her own discovery of what she came to believe was a betrayal. And she put all of that into print, in a memoir that was sold in bookstores across America and online. The Roloff fan base reacted instantly. Some fans rallied around Amy. They said she had been holding this in for too long. They said it was right that she finally told her side. They said Matt and Caryn had been the villains of the story all along, and Amy was simply telling the truth. Other fans turned on Amy. They said she was being bitter. They said she was airing being bitter. They said she was airing dirty laundry in public that should have stayed private. They said she was hurting her children by making the divorce more public than it needed to be. There were comments on Amy's Instagram, sometimes hundreds of them, criticizing her for what fans saw as a public attack on the father of her children. One fan wrote, in a comment that was widely shared, that Amy should not have slammed her children's father to the world. The fan wrote that it was a private matter that should have been discussed within the family. The fan wrote that the children were Amy's support team and that Amy had let them down. That kind of criticism was harsh, and it was not isolated. Amy spent months responding to similar comments on her social media, defending her right to tell her own story, while also acknowledging that she understood the criticism. Matt's response came on a podcast called First Class Fatherhood. In an episode promoted by Good Housekeeping, Matt said directly that he had gotten a chance to read the book and that he was disappointed. He said he did not think Amy was fair in her portrayal of him. He did not get into the specifics of the affair allegations. He did not deny or confirm the timeline. He simply said that he felt Amy's account of him was not balanced, that she had not represented him accurately, that the book hurt him. Matt has, over the years since, been careful not to publicly fight Amy on this issue. He has not written his own memoir explicitly to counter hers. He has not done extended interviews specifically about the book. He has simply said, in his own measured way, that he disagreed with how he was portrayed and moved on. Whether that restraint was out of consideration for his children or simply out of a calculation that engaging with the book would only give it more attention, only Matt knows. But the result is that Amy's account remains, in a sense, the definitive public version of what happened in the lead-up to the divorce. What is interesting about A Little Me, looking back on it now in 2026, is how much the book set in motion. When Amy wrote those passages about Matt and Caryn, she was telling her own story. She was processing her own pain. She was, in many ways, trying to take back ownership of a narrative that had been controlled for years by reality television producers and tabloid reporters. But the book did something else too. It planted a seed in the minds of millions of LPBW fans. The seed was the idea that Caryn Chandler had crossed a line, that she had not just been an employee, that she had not just been a friend, that she had been in some way complicit in the breaking of Amy's marriage. That perception, once planted, never went away. Caryn would spend the next 6 years living with the consequences of that single passage in Amy's book. Every fan who criticized her over the years did so in part because of Amy's framing in A Little Me. Every speculation about Caryn being a gold digger, every accusation about her influence on Matt's farm decisions, every theory about why she really wanted to be with Matt traced back in some way to the impression Amy created in her memoir. The book did not just describe the past, it shaped the future. And then, in July of 2025, when Matt and Caryn ended their engagement, fans pointed back to Amy's book again. Some fans said the engagement was always doomed because the relationship had been built on a betrayal. Some said the 8 years of Matt and Caryn together had been an aberration that finally corrected itself. Some said Amy had been right all along, and the proof was in the eventual collapse of the relationship she had warned everyone about. Whether any of that interpretation is fair to Caryn or to Matt is a separate question. But the fact that fans were still referencing Amy's 6-year-old book to explain a 2025 breakup tells you something about the lasting impact of A Little Me. The book also stands on its own as something more than a Matt and Caryn revelation. The reason A Little Me was a bestseller, the reason it continues to sell signed copies through Amy's online store, the reason it has stayed on people's bookshelves is that it is a genuinely moving account of one woman's life. The achondroplasia chapters, the childhood chapters, the faith chapters, the motherhood chapters, the chapters about building a business, raising 4 kids, surviving the pressures of celebrity, navigating the complications of being a public little person in an able-bodied world. All of that material is meaningful. All of that material has helped readers, particularly readers in the little person community and the broader disability community, see themselves reflected in a successful and authentic story. Amy's faith, her resilience, her father's voice in her ear telling her that God does not make mistakes. All of that gave the book a heart that went beyond reality television. And that heart is what has allowed the book to age well, even as the specific details about Matt and Caryn have become more controversial over time. What is also remarkable about A Little Me, in retrospect, is how it set up the next phase of Amy's life. The book represented Amy taking control of her own narrative. After it was published, she would go on to build her business, Amy Roloff's Little Kitchen. She would launch her own line of cooking products and content. She would marry Chris Merrick in 2021 and build the life we have talked about in other videos. The book was, in a sense, Amy's declaration of independence. She was done being defined by her marriage to Matt. She was done being a secondary character on Little People, Big World. She was going to tell her own story, on her own terms, and let the chips fall where they may. The fact that the book caused controversy, the fact that some fans turned on her, the fact that Matt was disappointed, All of that was a price Amy was willing to pay for finally owning her own voice. For fans of LPBW, A Little Me is essential reading if you want to understand the full Roloff story. It is not the whole story. It is one person's perspective on a complex marriage. It does not have Matt's voice in it. It does not have Caryn's voice in it. It does not have the children's voices in it. But it is Amy's voice, in her own words, telling her own version of what happened. And in a world where so much of the Roloff story has been shaped by edited reality television footage and tabloid speculation, Amy's voice in book form is something different. It is unmediated. It is reflective. It is, for better and worse, hers. Will Matt ever write a memoir of his own? That is a question fans have been asking for years. He has hinted at it in interviews. He has talked about wanting to tell his side someday. But as of this recording, he has not done it. And given the way Amy's book affected the family dynamics for years, it is possible Matt has decided that writing his own version would do more harm than good. Maybe he is waiting until the grandchildren are older. Maybe he is waiting until certain wounds have healed. Maybe he simply does not want to add to the public archive of Roloff family pain. We do not know. But if Matt ever does write a memoir, it would be one of the most anticipated reality television books of the decade. And it would, in some ways, be a direct response to Amy's account that has been the definitive version for 7 years and counting. So I want to know what you think. Was Amy right to share her perspective on Matt and Caryn in her memoir? Or do you think those revelations should have stayed private? Do you think the book is more powerful when read as an inspirational memoir about life with dwarfism, or more meaningful when read as the inside story of a complicated marriage? And do you think Matt should write his own memoir, or do you think he is right to stay silent? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and I want to know where you land on this. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe to LPBW Update, and ring the bell so you do not miss our weekly Roloff family stories. We are committed to bringing you the truth, the timeline, and the context behind the headlines. I will see you on the next one.